everyone, I'm Gemma Beall, and welcome to Attaining the Second Cognition. I'm going to try something new here, and I'm going to do an off-the-cuff, just like Endell's been doing lately, and this is completely unscripted. If I say "you know" too many times, I apologize. It's a habit I'm still working on trying to break. One of the things I want to talk to you guys about today, we ask for questions on here, and we want questions. We want to interact with you guys. But we're not asking you to ask us questions necessarily because we want you to listen to our answers and, take our word for it. We're asking you to ask questions not only to us, but ask the question in your mind. And that's one of the things that we say in several of the other of the videos, and I say in my books. It's great to ask other people questions, but ask them after you've done your own internal analysis. This is something that I always do. I see it. There I go. I talk to you guys about how I'm always contemplating. If I'm not at work, I'm actively engaged in contemplation in my head. If I'm driving to work, when I'm on my break at work, when I'm during my lunchtime, I'm contemplating. Sometimes I get to a contemplation point where I don't know where to go, so I turn off the asking myself the questions and just kind of let information that I've gotten from my contemplations kind of simmer within and assimilate, and I'll just have a blank brain, and once everything's kind of assimilated, then the answers will just pop into my head. Sometimes it could be 2 hours, sometimes it could be 5 hours, sometimes it could be 2 days or 2 weeks, but that's kind of my process. And Endell just did a video about getting past the sideshow stuff. And we have revealed some things that crew out there and working with crew that have been accomplished in this war against tyranny that we've been telling everybody about. And we understand the curiosity of wanting to know specifics. But what took place was done in order that you guys don't have to fight like we've had to. There's a lot of us that have been actively fighting a war with these adepts here on this planet, and this is stuff that you do not need to know about, not because you don't need to know about it, but because you need to focus on developing you. And that's the point that Endell was trying to make. Your whole path, just my whole path, is about me and developing my awareness for my Soika. Your whole path is about developing your awareness for your Soika. And although we are sharing our experiences and what we're learning, it's information that could give people more ideas or more contemplation information to take within on their own journey. Because if you're a Soika like we are, and we all came here to change this, you have a lot to remember. And you're only going to begin remembering that when you start doing the inner contemplation. You raise your awareness, you raise your frequencies, and you start tapping into that, and you're going to start remembering by asking yourself questions. Now, I'm going to make a very, I don't know what the word I want to use. I want to make a note here. If you look at the first cognition world around you, and this is something that is a classic symptom of mental illness as defined by the field of psychology, people that talk to themselves. People get embarrassed if somebody, sees them actually talking to themselves. And I'll be the first to admit, I talk to myself all the time. Not necessarily out loud, but in my mind. And I didn't start doing this until I cleared out the ego chatter, and I'm talking to my Soika, talking to myself, talking to my Soika, in order to process this information. I don't know about you, but me speaking out loud helps me hear the information. I'm processing it with multiple of my physical 5 senses, and that kind of helps me in the process of contemplation. Now, everybody may not be that way, but that, for me, that's what works best. So, I try not to do it when other people are watching, but if I am, and they do, and they point and laugh, I just flip them off and go about my merry way. I don't give a fuck what they think. But it helps me in my process so vastly that I really can't stress enough how important it is that when you're doing your contemplation, whatever method works the best for you, for your contemplation, that's what you need to do, and fuck everybody else if they don't like it. Now, another thing I want to point out, everybody knows that I have communication skills and I have a crew out there that I communicate with, and this whole channeled bullshit that the SPR and the Theosophy has done has just made other dimensional communication look like a fucking joke. And I know people will hear me say, oh, I talk to off-world aliens, blah, and they look at me like I'm batshit crazy. Well, one, I'm not batshit crazy. Two, it's not like it's portrayed. I don't sit there with candles lit all around me, with a table, wearing a headscarf and a creepy robe, and I don't sit there with my eyes rolling in the back of my head and my body shaking like that. It's like if I were to go and sit down at a table with you over a cup of coffee and we sit there and have a conversation, that is what my dealings with crew out there is like. I ask questions, they will give answers. Sometimes, most of the times their answers are glib. And the reason that they're being glib is not to be deceptive, is because they're not here to save us. They're not here to rescue us. They're not here to take my hand and stroll me along my path. They're here to kind of help us remember. And they had told me this from day one. From the day they showed up, they never told me that they loved me. They never told me I was loved. They never told me I was special or any of those fluffy shit that the New Age does. And they damn sure never said called me a dear one, because if they would have, they probably known I would have face punched them. But they have always made me feel. When I say made me feel, I'm not talking about invoking emotions. They've never done anything to purposefully manipulate my emotions. But every time in my dealings with them, even when I was straight up first cog, ego-driven, medium wannabe, they never ever treated me like that. I never felt special. I never felt loved, but I always felt powerful. I always felt in their presence that I could stand on my own in the whole entire universe, and I would not only be okay, but I would thrive. And that is the distinction of real crew off-world contact. The term aliens, hell, we call people not from the United States aliens, don't we? Think about it. We're not the only humans in the universe. One other thing I want to point out here that I do when it comes to deciphering information. We talk about how important discernment is, and we tell everybody, use your discernment even about our information. If your intuition says it's bullshit, then you believe it's bullshit and you move on. We know it's not, because we get this from our actual experiences and things that we've greatly contemplated. But there's a lot of things that we share that other people just aren't going to get, because it's not ever going to land in their realm of experience. One of the processes that I started doing early on, discernment's very hard to gain, especially when you're still very filtered. And when it's dealing with information, sometimes it's very hard to feel the information when you're not experienced it feeling, rather than operating in normal 3D function. So what I do, and I don't know if it's a trait or just, something I picked up from hanging around a lot of lawyers, is what a lot of attorneys do when they're working on a case, and I'm going to use this analogy because it's the best way to describe it. Whenever they're working on a case, they have to think of all angles. They have to look at what the opposing party is going to bring in the term of an argument, because that's all the legal profession is professional arguing. And they have to look at every possible angle that their opponent is going to bring to tear a hole in their case. So oftentimes what attorneys will do, they will put themselves in the opposing attorney's shoes. So if this is a person who's operating on a defense, in a defense capacity, they're going to turn themselves around and look at the case as they're on the prosecuting side. So they're going to look at it from two different angles, so they know what arguments are going to bring. And in order to do this, you have to think very sharply, and you have to be able to observe without being emotionally attached. And a lot of this information is kind of the same scenario. You're sitting here and you're taking in this new information, and you're trying to intuit this information, but it gets kind of confusing. You're not sure because you still have that little voice in your head that says maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And so what I do, I will take, if I come across some new information, say somebody put it out there and it's talking about similar stuff that we do. I know what I've already done. I know my history of whatever the topic is. I know what I've researched. I know what I've contemplated. I know the information I've already gained from within with talking crew out there, or just coming to my own insights. That I already know. But what I don't know, where did this other person get this information? Okay, where they got the information is not necessarily relevant. The information in and of itself is going to stand on its own, or it's going to fall under scrutiny. So what I do, I listen to the information, and I put myself in the other shoes of somebody who actually embraces it. Because before, I don't establish beliefs. I may embrace something as a concept or embrace something as valid, but I never hold anything as absolute truth, because if something presents to show me a larger picture, I'm going to discard the old perspective for the better perspective, or the newer perspective, or the more accurate perspective, because my path has taught me that's how you remain fluid. So what I'll do, I'll put myself in a position as if I embrace this message as a belief. And then I go through the process, my internal query process of picking it apart and tearing it apart to see where the holes are, or to see if it's going to stand up to that kind of scrutiny. If it does, I start digging internally to find out more information about it. If it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, I discard it as bullshit and I move along. But I'm not going to sit there and bash the person for, telling others what they believe to be true. So I just kind of wanted to share that information on the heels of what Endell's talking about, because I know that there are a lot of people out there like me who have these communication abilities. Some people have tapped into their abilities. Some people are very proficient with their abilities, and some people don't know if they have these abilities. And when you're trying to discover what your traits are, I remember being on my path, and my traits were in my face. I had no choice but to learn about them and learn to control them, or else I was going to go crazy. I'm fortunate enough that my Soika was strong enough to not end up in a mental hospital because of this shit. I know a lot of people, they cave when other people make them feel crazy. And fortunately, I never did that. I always knew in my Soika, I'm not crazy. This stuff is real, because it's always felt more real than anything I've ever experienced in this 3D fucking reality. So, the point of the message, and now you understand why I do scripted, because I'm less all over the place. I do want to say, we do want you guys to ask questions. And that's what the comment section is for. We want to create an environment where we could all talk, we could all share ideas, and we can all get along. And these presentations are designed to make you think. When I say think, it's designed to make you Soika feel, not 3D think or ego think. And when in my dealings with crew, they never, I mentioned earlier, they never come out and give me direct answers. And a lot of our conversations would be like, so, how about this? And I lay out an idea, and they're like, okay, that sounds good. What do you feel about it? They turn the tables on me, because at that stage of my development, I was using them as a crutch to give me all my answers. Yeah, I learned how to ask questions. I learned that when one question got a very simple, glib answer, that I could just ask another question and they would give me more information. And after a certain point, they're like, no. I am not here for you to lean on. I am not your crutch. I'm here to help you remember. So you need to start doing your part for your path, and you need to start trying to remember. There's things that they don't know. And so they go intuitively sit down and they fill it out, and they would come back and answer some of my questions. Well, you know what? I've got the same capability. Endell has the same capability. Why are we asking them to do what we have the ability to do? And that's when they put their foot down and they said, no, we're not going to do it until you've done it. And then once we've done that, we'll sit down and talk and compare perceptions. Okay, this is your perception as a non-Earth. This is your perception as a non-Earth human, and this is our perception as an Earth human. And it's in the discussion, not necessarily of their viewpoint versus mine, but it's the differences in the two viewpoints is where most of the information kind of bubbles to the surface. So that's something that you kind of keep in mind when you're doing your own internal contemplation and you are asking yourself these questions. Take note, and when I say take note, I mean literally write down your thoughts and write down your feelings. And when I say feelings, I'm not talking emotions. I'm talking about what you feel intuitively from the information. And once you've done that, come back and post your question out here. Not because you necessarily want to hear our answer, but it lets other people see what questions you were asking. Because one of the hardest things to learn how to do, believe it or not, is learn how to ask good probing questions. And none of us perceive things the same way. That's why it helps us talking to each other, because the way you see something in your mind may raise a different question than it raises in my mind, or it raises in somebody else's mind. And it's when we could sit down and all focus on these different questions that we start getting more detailed answers, because none of us have all the answers. And I don't even know if any of us have the capability of getting all the answers. But I think working collectively, trying to come to some understanding and sharing our perspectives is the way to do that, is to sit there and have these conversations. Now, the one thing I will say, and people have called me out on this before, and I'm not defending myself here, but it's a very valid point that I have. I've been through a lot of the theosophy stuff. I've looked at many things that are out there in the New Age that we've gone through over the years, and we've done our Q&A, and there's very few rocks that we have left unturned. And there's a lot of people who are still stuck glomming onto this New Age shit or this theosophy shit, because there is some truth in there, but it's speckled with so much bullshit that it's very hard to distinguish. And people's like, well, you don't want to hear what I have to say because I want to talk about this and you won't listen. But you know what? I've already been there. I've already studied it. I've already researched it. I've already did the deep inquiry. I've already embraced it and moved past it. And I understand exactly why I moved past it. I didn't move past it because it's theosophy stuff. I moved past it because I found no intuitive validity from deep contemplation with my Soika. I'm not going to revert back to something I've already done to appease you or anybody else. Neither should you. I want to thank everybody for listening and contemplating this information. If I ramble too much, I apologize. I will try to stick with the scripts. I'm Gemma Beall. Thank you once again, and stay the course and don't give up on yourself. Thank you.